All right. Welcome to another episode of Book Faces Live. I'm Nathan Van Coops. I'm your host, and today I'm very excited to bring you another interview with repeat guest H. Claire Taylor. Claire, thank you so much for taking time to be back on the show.
Yeah, I'm your most loyal guest. I just need that to be pointed out.
You're currently in a competition now. I had Chris back once, so now you're tied for first place for most repeat guests. You know?
Chris,
I know. Not that Chris. He's always everywhere. So hot right now. Claire, so we previously had you on a couple months back, and then I actually got to go meet you in person after that. I got to actually meet you in Chicago and have wild and wondrous times at the Selmore Book Show Summit. And then now we get to talk some more. So this is fantastic, and I'm really excited about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
Last time we talked about the fact that you're hilarious and you write funny books, and we covered some humor. But that is not all you're capable of. It seems like you have many other skills. And
I do. I have many coping skills. So.
Besides humor, you also... one of the things that I was excited to talk to you about was that you have some experience with editing and also like story structure. And one of the things that I've been really hoping to do with this show is kind of reveal some of these other elements that go into the creation of a book. So could you tell people a little bit about some of the background you've had in helping other people with their stories?
Yeah. So I did a lot of editing, sort of freelance for a little side cash in college. And then after that, I worked at as an in-house editor at a publishing company, and it was like a romance publishing company. This was kind of like in the Wild West days of indie, so people who didn't want to learn the process were paying this company to basically self-publish for them and do all the editing and stuff. So that not very selective. So we had all broad range of levels of literacy.
Okay.
And and it was very, very high volume, quick turnaround stuff. It was 8 to 5 days a week.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yes. So I did that for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half. And it was a really good trial by fire.
Okay.
I mean, you have to get all your language skills down as quickly as possible, because it's those little things where you're like, oh, wait, is it lay or lie? And, I mean, granted, I still have my Post-it notes that I just keep there as reference, but, you get it down to a science almost of being able to pick out the flaws and, the things that need to be fixed. So I did some content editing there and some copy editing there. It was just kind of like whichever one came through that they thought were a good match for us. I had certain editors that were, they got me and then they kept requesting me, so I would get put on their projects and that sort of thing. Okay. So that was the main, like, education. I would say it was an education. It was an education on a lot of things, just the nature of it being erotic romance. And lots of Googling, fact-checking. Yeah. I learned a lot about my body in that job. And then after that, I worked with I was in a really small critique group for a while, which taught me more about the story and being able to communicate what is missing in a story. Because that's really the crux of being a good editor, is being able to communicate. And being able to communicate the issue in a very positive way.
Okay.
So now I feel like, as with all the editing experience, I can tell someone that they're wrong in a very nice way that will make them feel very good about improving it.
That is a very important skill, and that's
yes. As long as I don't, get frustrated and lose my own head, I can pretty much say anything diplomatically now.
Because it's tough. I mean, it's your baby. These authors, especially new authors starting out, like, you've spent so much time, so much effort crafting this story and sinking your heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into this, and then to hand it to someone and say, "Is this good?" And then
tell me how this is bad.
Yeah, and then they have to, crush your hopes and dreams in hopefully a constructive way. That's got to be really hard.
Right, and that's the nature of the relationship. Is that you're handing it off to someone who is, their job is to to make it not suck so bad,
Yeah.
you know, and you're already in a place. And obviously, from an editing standpoint, you say, we're going to really find the strengths and build upon those,
Yeah.
you know, rather than like, you really just need to go back to the drawing board, you know. So it's just a very adversarial relationship that it's the editor's job really to turn into a friendship.
Yeah.
And a very intimate friendship, because you see all of their mistakes, you see all of their errors. You know, you're like, wow, they really don't know the difference between these two words. You know all these dark things that authors don't want others to know. And, you know, I mean, that's just the nature of the English language. Like, it's just a difficult language. You're never going to get it right.
Yeah, every time I read a book, I learned new things that I was doing wrong or didn't know.
Right, especially figures of speech.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I actually, one of the things that always made me laugh was people could never get the deer in the headlights, like that phrase. They look like a deer in the headlights. Mm-hmm. It was always like an elk in the head beams or something, you know, and I was just like, oh, I didn't know this was such a difficult
so close.
phrase. Yeah. Oh, one of these days.
Yeah.
I would have had to retire at that point if someone got it right. So I'm glad no one did.
One of the things you mentioned, you kind of, when you were talking about your experience, is you mentioned a few different terms, like critique group versus also like copy editing, things like that. Could you, for people who are just starting out and who maybe haven't got any experience in the editing realm yet, or maybe they're still working on their first manuscript and haven't handed it off, could you kind of explain what the different types of editing are, just briefly, so that you can, you know, people have an understanding, because editing's not just one thing. Can you explain the different parts?
Right, and there's different people use different, like, break these phases up different ways. So if someone's like, it has to go A, B, C, D, you can figure out how you want your editor, like what you want your editor to be in charge of. So some people, you know, like the definition of copy editing is pretty much line editing, but there's like slight differences. So if you have never done the editing process before, I would say when you are hiring an editor, ask them to be very clear about what they are and are not going to be looking for. Okay. That being said, there's sort of the story stage that you want, especially if you're new. You think your story makes a lot of sense. You think it's very compelling. Maybe it is. Maybe you just are naturally good at this, but probably there are some holes that need to be filled, and, you know, to create a nice flow and to make sure that you maintain tension throughout and people don't want to put the book down and never look back. Yeah. So that would be content editing is what we used to call it. And in-house, it's also called like a developmental edit. A critique group is going to be looking more at the story structure. So if you just get like a few friends together and look at each other's stories, like everyone knows a good story when you see it. You know, it pulls you in. So everyone's experiencing good stories all the time. So even if your critique group is inexperienced overall, you're going to have people who read it and go, oh, this kind of reminded me of this movie that was really good. And then you can have that interplay to like really break down why that movie resonated, why your story isn't quite hitting it, you know, and just be able to kind of figure it out yourself. Like you do have tools. It's just about articulating those tools. Yeah. So critique group, I would say everyone who's a beginner should find one, which is easier said than done. Because some critique groups are just jerks. I mean, really, like if you go to a critique group and you leave and you just want to like give it up and, you know, I mean, it's gonna hurt the first time you get that feedback. But if you're like, wow, I don't think they even like me, then like go to a different critique group, you know, because some people just do this and they just like the critiquing because it gives them an opportunity to tear you down. So once you can find a good critique group, stick with that. And then I think once you get those main problems out of the way, you're going to be much better prepared to send it to a developmental editor. Because you don't want to waste your money if it's like basic stuff that you just missed, and they, you know, developmental editors are best when they don't have to get in the weeds of like, okay, this scene to this scene is just not consistent. Like the character is wearing armor in this scene, and the scene they're in a tutu. Like you know, like if you get your developmental editor stuck in that kind of basic stuff, you're really going to miss out on letting them do what they do best, which is get into the story and say, this is good. You're antagonist is a little flat and it doesn't quite play off your protagonist, you know, and like these little things that will build this tension and make people keep turning the page. That's what your developmental editor is for. They're for helping you find the themes that you may have missed, helping you get your story to a point where, you know, a good story, like a good movie when you're watching it, I don't know if this is just my nerdiness, but you can kind of figure out, like, I'm maybe like 5 minutes away from the climax. Like, even if you completely lost sight of how much time has passed, you can feel that tension, and you know you're about to hit the climax. Well, a lot of times when you're first starting to write, you'll feel that tension 20% in.
Yeah.
Or you won't feel that tension at all, and then suddenly everything's blowing up, and you're like, wait, what?
Where did this come from? Yeah.
Yeah. So you really want to allow the developmental editor to focus on that.
So this is going to come to me. So if I've written my story and maybe I've got my first draft, then my developmental editor can say, okay, here's where your plot holes are, here's where your pacing issues are, and then you're going to get that manuscript back and then start doing your rewrites and your revision we talked about a couple weeks ago. Where you might, as a developmental, come back and be like, all right, I think I've discovered what your theme is, but it's not consistent the whole way through, things like that.
Right, so, and a good developmental editor will also help you figure out where sometimes scenes are out of order. Like, hey, what if you move this fight later on? Or that sort of thing. And they may come up with stuff that you set up for, but you never thought of. And it's very important to try to incorporate it. You know, like, you don't want them to take over your story. If you find a developmental editor that does seem like she's trying to hijack your story, maybe find a new one. But, you know, you want to be open to the feedback because they know what they're doing. And it's going to hurt. You're going to have your defenses up when you get someone who comes in and is trying to, you know, get their paws into your story. But it's good, and it's going to be better, and have a stiff drink and then deal with it the next day. You know, don't try and
do it right
make
away.
A decision.
I think that's a really good advice. Whenever I get feedback from an editor, I always sit on it first. I get mad in my head. I'm like, oh, they have no idea what they're talking about, but I don't actually respond at all until I read it again, and then with an open mind. And I'm like, they're pretty right about this. This is actually a really good idea, and I'm going to do that much
Anyone who tells you that you shouldn't feel really offended when you get something back from an editor, like, they're just not in touch, you know? Yeah. They're not, because it hurts no matter what it is. Even my proofreads I get back sometimes when it's like, oh, you did this wrong word. I'm like, you know what I was trying to say. And then I'm like, okay, come on. Yeah. Like, chill out, take a hot bath, get back to this.
So once we've gotten our major content in the right places and things like that, obviously we wanted to kind of do that first because getting into the weeds of more detailed editing or copy editing or proofreading, things like that, obviously we don't want to have done that because now we've wasted a bunch of time because scenes might have just completely gotten chucked or rewritten and such, right?
Yeah, and just mentally, if you have put a lot of work into specific passages, if those passages don't need to be there, it's going to hurt a lot more to part with them. So you're just trying to get the bare bones in the right place and, you know, flesh it out as much as you can, but don't really get in there and mess too much with the language until you've gotten it back from the developmental editor. And, you know, it may be that you get it back from the developmental editor and you want to make some changes and then send it back to them. That's fine. A lot of people don't do that just because of expense.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you have it down, then you want to get in there and make the language pretty. Or, you know, hit the tone right. If you're doing some sort of thriller action, you want to go in and weed down the really long sentences and make it more punchy. You know, that's where you get to be like your frilly artist, and really let your own voice in there. I mean, your voice is going to be in there in the first draft, but, you know, really decide, okay, what tone do I want for this scene? How am I going to use the tools in my kit to make it that way? And then once you do that, you'll send it to, ideally, if you do this process, you'll send it to a copy editor or a line editor, I guess. I don't know. I think that comes more from, like, newspapers and journalism and stuff, but
industry
that wasn't. Yeah, so it's a copy editor is just, or whoever, whatever they call themselves, is going to go through and make sure that, you know, they're going to pick up any errors that they see. but they're not going to be going really in depth. They're not necessarily going to be fact checking. They might for you if that's something they offer. They're not going to be reading it at such a fine, like going through it with such a fine-tooth comb that they're going to find all your typos. So you can't rely on them for that. So you really want to give the copy editor as clean of a manuscript as you can, because they will be tripped up on excessive typos, missing, ending quotation marks, or if you just have run-on sentence after, you want to give it to them as clean as possible so that they don't have to be a word janitor. Yeah. Because that is the temptation that a lot of people will do a first draft, give it to a content editor, and just expect them to clean up the mess. Okay. And you can do that, and there are a lot of people who offer that service for very, very cheap. But if you want someone to really help you with the language and make sure that it flows, make sure you're not being redundant and not, there's not a bunch of echoes. I'm like, my writing style, I have a ton of echoes. I'll get stuck on a word and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use precarious 10 times in this paragraph. And, then I go back and I'm like, oh, God. Yeah, that's how the human brain works a lot of times, especially my dumb human brain. But
I'm right there with you.
And that stuff, and you can't possibly see it, but you want to clean it up as much as possible. Learn your own, stumbling blocks, so that when you give it to the content or the copy editor, he or she can do some actual magic, and you'll get it back, and you'll go, oh, that sentence that I was really struggling with, they fixed it and it sounds so much better. Yeah. And you'll just be like, oh, this is the real book now.
It flows, yeah. We had a question, an advanced question. Marilyn asks, for Claire, do you have a checklist to look at and make sure a story you are editing has all the right elements? Do you use a checklist for this?
No. Well, it depends on if I've worked with that author a lot, and I know some of their quirks, then it's like, okay, I know that I need to do something as simple as a control F search for there, and there, because that's really easy to overlook when you're reading through it. Or or sometimes I did that. When I was working in-house, I had a lot of checklists. Because it was just, you have to move through so quickly that your mind's going to skip over some dumb stuff. So that, yes, I had a whole checklist of homophone errors, and, I would write people's names down with the spelling, because a lot of the times people get the spelling. That was more on the copy editing side, because I didn't really do proofreads there. It was the copy editor was also supposed to be the proofreader. So for that kind of stuff, there is a good checklist. But it varies so much from person to person, from author to author, what they need, that I don't think you can do everything, right? You're not trying to make this the perfect book as an editor. You're trying to find, okay, what can I leverage to make this as good as it can be, as cheaply as possible for this person?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's might be more helpful for the author themselves to keep a list of things that they messed up on the previous book, or things that they messed up on this book, so that those are things you don't introduce into your next book that you write. I mean, theoretically, every time you do this, you should be learning something new, getting a little bit better at this.
Right, and I don't think that it's healthy. There are, when I'm doing a, say, copy edit, because content edit, you could technically do a checklist, but it's a little bit more abstract, and I don't think that a checklist would necessarily, benefit, because it's more about you're reading a scene, you're going, this is not, it's kind of like the smell test. You just got to kind of go, nope, not here. Okay, let's see what's going on here, and really get into it, rather than checking off, okay, character arc for protagonist, secondary characters, no extraneous secondary characters, and that would be awful to do just from an editing perspective. But for content editing, or for copy editing, you could technically do that, but I think if you're going to try and fix everything for an author, there is a point at which the benefit of it is diminishing returns, because they're going to get a manuscript back that's so, covered in corrections that it's overwhelming. Yeah. So most authors don't care that much. They don't want to be, like, they don't care about the language being so perfect so much as like, is it correct? You know, so you kind of have to know your audience and who you're working with too.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, and anyone else who's watching, thank you for that question. If there are more questions and more comments, definitely just throw them up there, and we'll try to get to them. We had a comment pop up from Scott King. Says, "Hey, that's Claire. She's smart and mostly funny, but she's also a good person, though she doesn't like to admit it." Scott,
I'm sorry, I rolled my eyes when you named you up now, Scott. I know it's a compliment. Jeez.
Previous guest of the show, Scott, and he's also a very fun guy.
Noted heckler.
Yeah, doing what he does best. So thank you, Scott, for the comment. And like I said, if anyone else has comments throughout the episode while we're live, if you want to throw those up, we'll try to answer them. Or if you want
compliments for me,
or compliments for Claire. And if you're watching the replay later, feel free to throw up some questions anyway. We can potentially get in the comments later and have Claire answer those questions after the fact as well. So feel free, if you're watching the replay, just keep on asking questions. No problems. But so we talked a little bit about the different types of editing, and you have a particular. I know you were building sort of a new program where you're actually going to be helping people out, doing some coaching on story structure. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's kind of coaching. It's more like emergency services.
Okay.
But it's called the Story Alignment. It's currently in beta, just because I want to make sure my process is as streamlined as possible. I don't want to waste people's time, on calls and that sort of thing. But basically what I will be doing is people will fill out an intake form about their story. People who are having trouble either, sometimes you get stuck and you're like, I need to get from point, N to point Q in this story, and I don't know how to do that. Yeah. Or, your characters just aren't that interesting, or you're getting bored with the story, which is a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting bored with the story, your readers are going to be bored because they're going to feel it, or it's a sign that your story is boring. So you want to fix that before you keep pushing forward.
For sure.
Or if you have writer's block, or if you just have a great story and you want to make it richer so that it's prime for a second reading, a third reading, it makes those mega fans, or it's really meaningful to you and you aren't quite sure the best way to, really convey that. All these little things that are actually pretty quick fixes. I'm going to be offering like half-hour calls and hour calls, and then I'll have a package of 4 hours for people who want to buy it at the start of a book. Because sometimes, once you get going and you have written a handful of books, like, oh, this one's going to be a pain in the ass. And you can buy that and have that sounding board. You can do it an hour before to kind of make sure you're in the right track and you're developing things, and maybe one midway through, and then, towards the end. So it's going to be various packages, and then, of course, if someone wants something special, I'm not a difficult person to work with. We have to ask my husband about that. I don't know. But yeah, so it's going to be the like on call kind of thing. Generally, it's going to be like, schedule it 2 days in advance, just so I can have a weekend and people. But there will be like a text Claire now option, and
emergency
as long as I'm not sleeping or now watching World Cup or
Who are you rooting for?
Who am I rooting for?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I like watching Germany play, but I don't think it's going to be. And see, now we're recording this, and so I'm going to be held to it. But I don't think it's the year of the really self-disciplined team. Like it just seems to be the year of the scrappy, passionate team. I mean, I could see Mexico getting to the semifinals.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And it's just the style of play is so unpredictable. And then of course I like Iceland.
Yeah, I saw them putting up that wall, and that was just like they were not letting Argentina have their day. So that was pretty exciting. But anyway, I'm sure we could wander off into World Cup topics another time. But Ernie Dempsey says hello also. By the way, says two of my favorite people together in one Power Packed episode. That's right, Power Packed. That's what this is.
Yeah, thanks for that tagline, Ernie.
So one more time, could you tell us the name one more time of your service, that your up and coming service? What that's
Yeah, it's going to be called the Story Alignment, and it's going to actually be offered through my publishing media company, which is FFS Media.
FFS Media.
So it will be at ffs.media once it's launched.
Okay, cool.
And so if you want to, I guess if you want to like know about it, like I don't have an email list set up, but if you want to know when it's live, you can just friend me on Facebook. I'm going to be obnoxious about it, so you'll know.
You anyway.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Yeah, because I think it is a really powerful tool to just have someone to talk to, because I've found that if I can explain my story out loud to someone and it makes sense, then all of a sudden I know that I have a good story. And I can usually tell if I'm in the middle of explaining something and I hit the wall, and I'm like, this is the part I can't explain. That's probably the part that needs help. And,
right. And so it's not like, the service itself is not a teaching service. You know, it's for people like you who, it's like, that your antagonist needs to be a foil for your protagonist. Like, you know these things, you know how to create that tension, you know that it goes, rising action, climax, and then falling action, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know all the basics, you've read the basic books, you are really into it, but you just can't, sometimes you just can't get through it. And you don't have time to go back and read an entire book. And that's what I'm for, because I go through and I read all those books all the time. And I'm obsessed with it. And I talk about it. And
what are some...
sure my husband's going to be happy that I stopped deconstructing all the TV shows we watch.
I know my wife's the same way. She's like, Mike, do you recognize what's happening now? Did you see the Save the Cat moment? And he's like, what are some books that you do recommend for people who are just starting out, some of these craft books, maybe if they haven't gotten to this point yet? What are some of your go-to structural things? Or just craft books that you think like to have people in.
I think of like some like quick ones. I mean, there's all kinds of online resources that you can just look for. I'm enjoying the what's it called? John Truby's story.
Is it 22 elements of a storytelling
something
or something
like that? Yeah.
Anatomy of a story, right?
Yes, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Good. I don't even have to pull up my Kindle. That one's good. If you're just starting out, Alyssa Archer has a really good series about writing a book in a year, or a novel in a year. And so she takes you through all the processes of brainstorming and drafting and editing and marketing. It's 4 separate books, and Alyssa knows her stuff. So Google Alyssa Archer.
That's cool. And since Scott King is watching, we can compliment.
And Scott knows what he's doing.
I'm reading his How to Outline Your Novel book right now, and I'm enjoying it a lot because he's got a great voice. So I'll plug Scott while he's watching. Thanks, Scott, for your book.
Good book.
Yeah, maybe we could, when you're not on the spot, maybe we can post up some links in the comments to Claire's favorite craft books.
I'm like in such a like fugue state about books. I'm trying to do that 100-book challenge this year, and so I'm just cramming books, and I don't even remember the titles.
I previewed this in the title of this video, so I am gonna bring it up just for a second.
Okay.
But you had an interesting blog post because you have a good blog following, but one of your blogs recently was about the idea of planning to fail at some new things this year. You're going to attempt some things that you haven't attempted before, and you're going to can you tell us a little bit about that kind of idea. What inspired it?
What inspired it? Well, failure is probably what holds most people back, right? It's this fear of failure, and it looks different ways to different people, what failure looks like. For me, public humiliation is, it's kind of up there, but mostly it's like, for me, it's putting myself out there and people going, oh, she's a terrible person. So which, good thing I write religious satire, right? That doesn't
no one
anything.
No one ever criticizes that.
A little bit counterphobic with that one. But, so these things that we hold ourselves back with, that I've wanted to do forever, that people have said, you gotta do this. And I'm like, I know. And then you just don't prioritize it because the resistance to it is so great. My thought process is, if I can learn to enjoy failure, that's pretty powerful. And, that's, I think for anyone is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But can one enjoy failure? I don't know. I think I have some theories brewing about this. So This is kind of a social experiment, because maybe by definition failure is not enjoying what you're doing, or whatever.
Maybe, yeah. I think I'll be curious to follow along with your attempts and what your results are.
It's been a little bleak lately. I'll admit, the blog posts have been a little bleak. But yeah, so this is going to be stuff like getting published in McSweeney's, which I've never done. I just got a rejection for it, and it felt great.
There you go.
Yeah, so
solid attempt then.
Check. It didn't hurt to fail on that one. Publishing a book that's been really difficult for me to write. Working on some stand-up. I'm going to do an open mic night. I am. That's
a big. That would probably be on some people's like things worse than dying list, and you're going for it.
We'll see how it goes. It may make it onto mine.
No, I think you're going to do great. I can imagine if you put together a good set. I'm sure I would laugh.
Well, you would have to, or we wouldn't be exactly.
That's right. Obligatory laughs all around.
Yep. Oh, I'll take them. But so I'm just trying to blog every day. I think I missed Monday because I had a really good date night, which is I'm not going to get too into that, but it was just kind of like I was in a good mood and I forgot to blog about failure. Whoops. But generally I'm blogging 6 days a week, taking Sundays off, no failing on the Lord's Day, and then just trying to keep it up for the summer.
Okay.
So
if people are interested in your blog, where can they find it?
It is hclaireblogs.com.
Okay. All right, cool.
And it's, I've been keeping it up for a few years now, pretty off and on, but there's some fun stuff on there. And if you comment, it would be great, because right now it's just a bunch of spammers.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
It would be nice to have someone. There's one guy who was talking about how American women are terrible. It was like this copy-paste, and it just kept showing up like, American women are terrible, get a mail-order bride. And I was like, I'm tempted to improve this.
Yeah. They're setting the bar kind of low on your comments. So.
Yeah. So, you can even control me, and it's fine, as long as you're, a legit person.
Yeah. Be clever about it, and you're already going to win the comments section on the blog.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's very competitive.
Well, it sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to following along and hearing some of your upcoming adventures and learning more about your story structure kind of process and
launching that is one of the things that I'm going to try to embrace failure on.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a wild success to me. I think that's something that's
I hope
very
so, but
needed.
it's very hard to claim expertise even when you are an expert.
Yeah.
So
that is true. But there are many people who claim to be experts who are not good at what they do. So it's true. I would rather have someone who is good.
Do you want to name some names, Nathan?
We'll have to just come up with some sort of review system, and when you get some glowing gold star reviews, then we'll know that people like you.
Finally, I'll know.
All right, so we somehow whizzed through half an hour already, so this went by really quickly, as expected. But so if anyone, we're probably going to wrap things up here in a couple minutes. But if people are watching, like I said, if you're late to the party, or if you have comments for Claire, if you're watching the replays, feel free to shoot them up. I'm going to have this ongoing for a while, so Claire, I'm sure will be happy to come back and answer your comments and questions, or give you a little bit more advice if you're struggling with story structure, things like that. Yeah,
you could have me on a third time, so I can,
That's
be
true.
the most, officially the most, not tied first,
all right.
The most loyal.
All right. We're going to start a competition. You and Chris can fight it out, figure it out.
Okay.
So yeah. Claire, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sparing time on your busy day and coming on and hanging out with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Then we will talk to you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we've got another episode next week, so stick around and we'll talk to you then. All right. See ya.